Yes. What is it you want? Come on, man, out with it!
Today we're going to be going into how I did the voice for Renesco in the mod Talking Heads, a Fallout 2 restoration. So to give you guys an understanding of how to get into the voice, I have to actually cover a lot of ground of what Fallout 2 really is to understand from a voice actor's point of view, as well as just the time capsule it serves to be in terms of gaming history. Fallout 2, obviously if you're clicking on this video and want to watch, is obviously an old game. You know that, or at least should know, that it's a late 90s RPG isometric, formerly made by Black Isle Studios before the IP had to be given over to Bethesda by time of Fallout 3 in 2008, I want to say. Ramble will edit this, so obviously he'll scream at me during the process. Anyway, this is a game from the late 90s, and it's very obvious when you get into the themes of how to voice a character, because with the mod, the Talking Heads Restoration, not only does it preserve the time capsule of its dialogue, it even preserves a lot of shameless, offensive, dark, and very gritty nature that it just gives. Remember, Fallout 2 and 1 are the same games that back then had killable children, so just remember that when voicing some of this dialogue that I'm going to go over. Obviously, for YouTube purposes, I'm not going to go for the most extreme dialogue, and it's not really like Fallout 1 and 2 are insanely offensive. There are definitely some dialogue that you'll hear when you do play the mod, if you do play the mod, you should, that, oof, that was the 90s, you know, that was how they did things. Which goes into my first tip about how to voice Renesco: play Fallout 2, please. This is very important because while you could go through a list of wiki pages and, you know, Fallout Explain and whatever, it's just not going to really get that feel going for what you're actually voicing for. A lot of what the Fallout 2 dialogue is very much the same as every entry after. It relies on player interaction and player interjection. But the difference also is the fact that with Fallout 2, they actually give the player way more of a distinct series of personalities that very extreme personalities of the NPCs are going to be jumping back and forth with. They're not going to have just a 1-2 punch of, say, oh, where is this location? Location's here. You're going to have, because of how Fallout 2 differs from 1, very, very ridiculous, extreme, goofy, and just flat out insane back and forths with the player. So, play Fallout 2, and for the purposes of trying to get Renesco's voice down, or at least understanding how to do a voice like Renesco and how to voice that kind of character, play most of the New Reno quest lines, investigate New Reno in the game, explore it, and just make sure you absorb most of the content you could have there as a player. The second tip you're going to want to have is to read all Renesco lines. Now, thankfully, for the ease of the two guys over at the RLC Gaming Productions, a lot of the scripting that they gave me, they didn't have to just spend hours interpreting it from, you know, in-game constant writing. They actually found one of the various wiki pages having an entire script that you could just look up if you click on the technical pages of each NPC, and you'll see, oh, there it is. This text or this file, click on that, boom, and there's everything there. So, reading all that straight from the wiki, going over it, practicing a couple times, even trying to, like I said, play the game to see how it kind of bounces back and forth in action, is going to help you a lot when trying to get the character, trying to get a feel for the character. Renesco is a very interesting case because he's kind of like this pharmacist drug dealer in New Reno, and he really hates his job. At least he hates dealing with a lot of the clientele, the people there. They're all scumbags to him. They're all vermin. So the best way to kind of get him, pull any experience you might have ever had from retail or customer service, especially if it's any kind of place like a gas station. Like if you could get it from a gas station kind of experience, you could nail him pretty well. Because the frustrations that most cashiers or clerks or whatever have you experience, it's pretty much the same, pretty much on point to what Renesco kind of always will verbally abuse the player over. It's constantly like the inner monologue of every cashier or customer service worker you're going to deal with. Now, the third tip is probably the most important one. Renesco speaks in a very advanced vocabulary that even I'm not comfortable with. So when I read some of the lines, I had to really sit with that vocabulary and really be comfortable with it. Like, I had to really be able to digest it, pronounce it right, have it roll off the tongue fluently as best I could, especially with lines such as,
another postnatally aborted wreck in a post-Holocaust world replete with idiot man children. Out of my shop.
That's a mouthful. And when I first read those lines, even the audition phase, just to get the role, it took me like a good 10 tries just to really understand what he said until I got it. So just remember, when voicing Renesco, look up these words when you find them and really sit with that word and pronounce it a good bit. Thankfully, it's not like he's getting into crazy territory of scientific terminology and Latin words, so getting to know what he's saying, how he's saying it, and also just why he's saying it is a pretty good thing to just have in your arsenal when trying to voice a character like him. So that's a very important tip I would have to highlight in star brackets. For the fourth tip, this is a pretty simple one. Understanding the bleak hardness that he has and why, with his bitter hatred for a world he lives in. Now, Fallout 2 and every Fallout game does not shy away from being a very brutal post-apocalyptic world, especially with the old games, and especially with, let's say, New Vegas, with, the brutality of Caesar's Legion, slavery, and so on. That said, especially in Fallout 2, it's a very peculiar world at that time period because there's slavery all about, there's mafioso gangsters shooting up people, there's xenophobia, second-class citizenship. It's a pretty dark world in Fallout 2. And by the time the player goes out into the world as the Chosen One, being a tribal, you're probably going to be seen as a second-rate freak in comparison to super mutants and ghouls, just by the fact that you're from a tribe, and that's it. So with Renesco, you have to understand that kind of world that he's in, because that's going to really deeply shape in the kind of man he is, especially when I get into more of the nuances of what makes Renesco Renesco. The fifth tip is, remember, Fallout 2 is very comedic and cartoony despite the darkness. It is a dark comedy post-apocalyptic world. Yes, it does follow the entry of Fallout 1, and it does follow every entry past that with these themes of war never changes and all that. But really, that tone shift didn't really set in place at the time Fallout 2 was made. If anything, Fallout 2 was more criticized on its release for being a lot more cartoony than the first game. Personally, myself, I love the cartoony atmosphere. I love the dramatic change from Fallout 1 and 2 because it's at a different time period in the Fallout lore, as well as the fact that Fallout 1, in my personal opinion, could have used more flair in the aspects that Fallout 2 provided with these different kind of ecosystems of settlements to settlements. Reading being more of like this sheriff, Wild West boomtown kind of feel, to then New Reno being, a shithole, Vice City, so on and so forth. Now, tangent aside, knowing that firsthand, that it's a lot more cartoony, a lot more goofy and silly, it's going to help you ease into the character voice of Renesco a lot better with the comparisons I will make in the later tips, as well as the fact that you get to have a lot of fun with it, and you don't get to really feel like, I'm not really fitting the theme because it's all war never changes. Trust me, Fallout 2 is the oddball out. It's the goofball of the series. Now that I'm done prefacing, it's time to do the voice. So for the voice of Renesco, think typical high elf posh from any media, Dungeons & Dragons, Skyrim, but what you're going to want to do is, rather than being a pompous high elf from Somerset Isle, or where you look down at humans, you're going to want to Americanize it, more of the American accent and flow. And what you're going to realize when you Americanize it, you stupid ape, you jackanape fuck, is that this is Renesco, a tired man that just wants to sell the drugs to his clientele full of vermin, slavers, tribals, and all these stupid primates that are just irradiated mutants. These jackanapes that are nothing but postnatally aborted wrecks that should have been replete from this world to begin with. This is Renesco, and I am the Rocket Man. Now, could you please kindly go so that I have better things to attend to? Renesco, while being a nihilistic, bitter, and sneering asshat, is still at his core a man of some morals. The lines I read when I discovered this was actually, spoiler alert, when Renesco is discovered for concocting a poison by the Salvatores to harm one of the Right kids. Renesco goes from his usual threats and verbal spearing in the dialogue to eventually pleading, to finally slipping the mask to even say this line.
Salvatore's requested it. They said it was a special order. I didn't know they were going to give it to the right kid. You have to believe me. I don't poison kids.
Now, whether or not you, the person doing the voice, believes him, that's irrelevant. You are him, and thus, you might as well think your word is gospel, especially when voicing a character that is so sure of himself that he lives in a world he doesn't even belong to. Renesco is an odd one in the sea of Fallout 2 characters because while he shares similar pompous attitudes of, say, Vault City in the game, he actually is in the middle of New Reno, and he even compares the two with favoring Reno by only stating,
"Don't thank me, primate. You're better off in New Reno. At least the people sizing you up in a coffin are honest about it."
And that right there is a little hint of the paradoxical mindset that is Renesco. He's a pharmacist drug dealer in a city he shares nothing but contempt for with his clientele and the people he is under the thumb of. Yet honesty is his policy. He'd rather be in that cesspool where he sees the ugliness for what it is than hide in some gilded cage with false hopes and fake people. Renesco almost revels in the discordant selfish nature of New Reno because it allows him to feed his own vice, so to speak, as he sells it to the customers, his vitriolic hatred. Now, something that is uncomfortable for some, but it has to be said if one wishes to know the journey it took to voice Renesco the way I did in the mod is being prejudiced. In Fallout 2, you play as the Chosen One, like I said, who is a tribal descendant from the Vault Dweller from Vault 13 from the very first game. The interesting perspective that Fallout 2 throws the player in is being a post-apocalyptic tribal having to deal with the various remarks, bigoted thoughts of you as a savage, cannibalistic, or even just pea-brained. Fallout 2, unlike some entries that would follow, does not shy away from the vulgar, offensive, and even at times dehumanizing dialogue to put upon the player for simply being a tribal, for simply having a background that is the Vault 13 tribe of Arroyo. Fallout 2's world is one that is purposely framed as a frontier-esque way of life. Its aesthetics more obvious when you reach places like Redding, MODOK, or even the NCR. While New Vegas did a similar approach, Fallout 2 does stand out with its shameless themes of slavery, second-class citizenship, and discrimination of a group of people being, of course, tribals. The obvious parallel to real-life American history of the Wild West era and the Manifest Destiny that happened in real life in real time is an obvious statement of what Fallout 2 is trying to say with the post-nuclear futuristic flavoring of what would happen in basic human nature when other groups of people have to live with each other and there's always a pegging order. This all falls in line with the world Renesco is shaped by, and has influenced to the detriment of lumping tribals in his world the same as gangsters, addicts, and slavers with this following line here.
Does it bother me to sell them to idiots, slavers, crime lords, and tribals that the world would be better off without? Primate, 3 words. Get out more.
Now for a part of Renesco that to me is a bit silly in his anger. His use of the term primate. You've been hearing it over and over in some of the examples, now it's time to kind of explain it. One could say that it's easily just accountable to only tribals, but the reality is there are other lines of dialogue I read and voiced that just suggested to be simply one of many terms that he uses in his arsenal to people he looks down upon. Mongrels, jackanapes, primates, those are all terms he's said about other people, that all seemed to share a theme about equating those people with animalistic tendencies. To further prove that this is more of a series of catch-all terms, he even references Vault City as just a bunch of jackanapes despite their education and technological prowess in Fallout 2.
Hell no, Primate. I have heard of Vault, sure, but not Vault 13. Closest thing is Vault City to the northeast. And if those aristocratic jackanapes inherited a vault once, they sure as hell don't live there no more.
And that right there is the catch. Renesco is so full of hatred and malice to everyone that when answering a question in his own casual manner, he will still throw these judgments willy-nilly as if that is the way life is, that no matter who you are, to Renesco, you're just an animal in human skin waiting to prove him right. And that, my friends, is the Rocket Man of New Reno. That is how I voiced an angry drug dealer from Fallout 2 and the Talking Heads mod. In the description below should be a link to the RLC Gaming Productions, which is of course a series of showcases from this channel that they post from of the Talking Heads mod. Special thanks to the team members Black Electric and Goat Boy from the RLC Productions for accepting my voice in the role for Renesco, and then various others that might come down the road, and literally without them, I wouldn't be able to make this video. And special shout out and thanks to Rambalime for helping edit this video and having been an editor just because he wants to and because he truly supports and sees something in me. It's beyond words at times how much people will just go out and do things for you because they want to. So thank you, Rambalime. Thank you, RLC Gaming Productions. And if you enjoyed the lovely tunes in the background of this video, this was all produced by Human-Like. Human-Like is one of my best producers when it comes to my own music, which, if you're interested in that, check it out here. Now, with all that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for tuning in to my first ever start of a series, and I hope there's more to come. And I hope there's more of you to come as well. Until next time, it's been 2 effing colors, Crimson Gray, and I hope you've been having a great day.